The fluorescent lights of the Starlight Diner flickered intermittently, casting an eerie glow on the worn-out linoleum floor. Elena Rodriguez adjusted her name tag, her tired eyes scanning the nearly empty restaurant. Another endless night shift on Orbital Station Epsilon 9, a forgotten outpost at the edge of human-controlled space. At 42, Elena had seen her share of strange customers. Miners with cybernetic implants, weary traders from distant colonies, and the occasional lost soul seeking refuge from the unforgiving vacuum of space. But tonight felt different. The station's recycled air seemed charged with an unusual tension. The bell above the door chimed, and Elena looked up. A figure entered, tall, cloaked, moving with a strange, fluid grace that seemed both powerful and wounded. Most of the other patrons instinctively shifted away, their conversations dropping to hushed whispers. The stranger approached the counter, each step deliberate yet unsteady. As it drew closer, Elena noticed something extraordinary. Beneath the worn cloak, glimpses of iridescent scales caught the light, blue-green with hints of silver, unlike anything she'd seen before. "Can I help you?" Elena asked, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. The figure slowly lowered its hood, revealing a face that was both alien and strangely familiar. Reptilian features, sharp, angular, with eyes that held depths of intelligence and profound weariness. A species Elena had only heard about in historical archives, a Zortak believed to have been extinct for generations. The alien's voice was a low, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate through the air. "Water," it said simply. "And information." Elena didn't hesitate. She grabbed a large glass, filling it from the filtered dispenser. "You look like you've been through something," she said, sliding the water across the counter. "Rough journey." The Zortak's eyes, vertical pupils set in irises of deep emerald, studied her with an intensity that made Elena feel simultaneously vulnerable and respected. "Pursuit," it finally responded. "Survival is complicated." Most would have backed away. The station's security protocols were clear about potentially dangerous alien encounters. But Elena had spent her life on the margins, understanding that survival often looked different for everyone. "You're hurt," she observed, noting the way the creature's cloaks seemed to hang differently on one side, suggesting an injury. A slight inclination of the head. Was it a nod? A gesture of acknowledgement? "Medical supplies are expensive," the Zortak said. "Credits are limited." Elena knew that story all too well. Her own credits were always one mechanical failure away from complete depletion. She reached beneath the counter, pulling out a basic medical kit, standard issue for diner workers who often dealt with space-related emergencies. "Here," she said, pushing it forward. "Consider it on the house." The reaction was subtle but profound. Something in the alien's posture shifted, a softening, almost imperceptible, but as real as the station's artificial gravity. Why? The question carried centuries of mistrust, of conflicts long remembered. Elena shrugged. "Because sometimes being kind is the only currency that matters." Little did she know, this moment of compassion would set in motion a series of events that would challenge everything humanity believed about its place in the cosmos. Outside the diner's reinforced windows, the stars continued their silent watch, indifferent witnesses to an encounter that would soon reshape the delicate balance of power between species. The Zortak took a careful sip of water, scales catching the light, eyes never leaving Elena. A connection had been forged, unexpected, fragile, but undeniably significant. The aftermath of Elena's encounter with the Zortak alien came swiftly and unexpectedly. Less than 24 hours after providing medical supplies and water, she found herself standing before Station Administrator Marcus Reyes, her employment status hanging in the balance. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Reyes' voice was a controlled fury, each word carefully measured to inflict maximum impact. The office was a sterile environment of brushed metal and holographic displays, a stark contrast to the dingy diner where her life had just changed irrevocably. Elena met his gaze without flinching. I helped someone in need. Last I checked, that wasn't a violation of station protocol. Reyes leaned forward, his cybernetic eye, a gleaming silver implant that marked him as part of the station's senior administration, flickered with data streams invisible to Elena. That someone is a potential security threat. Zortak haven't been seen in human space for over a century. The last encounter ended in a war that nearly decimated two civilizations. The words hung in the air, charged with historical weight. Elena knew the basics. Every spacer child learned about the Zortak conflict, a devastating series of battles that had pushed humanity to the brink of extinction. But something about the administrator's reaction felt different. Too rehearsed, too neat. "You're firing me for showing basic compassion," she challenged. A thin smile crossed Raya's lips. "You're being relieved of your duties pending a full investigation. Consider it administrative leave." But Elena knew better. This was no leave. This was a removal, a silencing. Outside the administration wing, the station hummed with its usual mechanical rhythm. Maintenance droids scuttled along maintenance corridors. Recycling systems churned, and the massive life support mechanisms kept hundreds of humans and alien residents alive in the unforgiving vacuum of space. What Reyes didn't know was that Elena had already taken precautions. The medical kit she'd given the Zortak contained a micro-tracker, not an official surveillance device, but a personal safety measure she'd developed during years of working in unpredictable environments. Her old military communication implant, carefully hidden beneath the skin behind her ear, began to pulse. A signal, weak but definitive. The alien was still within the station's vast network of corridors and service tunnels. Meanwhile, in the shadowy corners of Epsilon 9's lower decks, a different conversation was taking place. A group of figures, some human, some bearing modifications that pushed the boundaries of what was considered standard biological enhancement, gathered in a chamber shielded from standard communication networks. "The Zortak is here," a figure draped in a multilayered environmental suit announced. The voice was synthesized, gender-neutral, carrying an authority that suggested significant power. Another responded, their form a blend of organic and mechanical components. "Impossible. Our intelligence suggested complete extinction after the quantum purge." "Not extinct," the first figure corrected. "Hidden. Waiting." The implications were enormous. The Zortak, a species once considered the most technologically advanced civilization in the known galaxy, had not been destroyed. They had simply withdrawn, biding their time for reasons unknown. And now, because of a simple act of kindness by a diner waitress, that carefully maintained silence was about to be broken. Elena Rodriguez didn't know it yet, but she had just become the focal point of a conflict that had been brewing for generations. Her simple act of providing water and medical supplies to a stranger would soon unravel a conspiracy that stretched across multiple star systems. As she walked through the station's corridors, her termination papers clutched in her hand, the micro-tracker continued its silent pulse. Somewhere in the labyrinthine structure of Epsilon 9, the Zortak was moving, watching, waiting. The game had only just begun. The archival vault of Epsilon 9 was a place most station residents never saw. Buried deep within the station's central core, it was a sanctum of forgotten histories, sealed records, and classified documents that told stories too dangerous for public consumption. Elena Rodriguez knew she shouldn't be here. The access credentials she'd lifted from an unsuspecting junior administrator were burning a metaphorical hole in her encrypted data chip. Each step through the climate-controlled corridor felt like a dance with disaster. Her investigation had begun simply enough. A few discreet inquiries, conversations with old contacts from her military intelligence days, and a growing suspicion that her firing was more than just a routine security measure. The Zortak's presence, and the station administration's extreme reaction, suggested something far more complex was at play. The central database terminal hummed to life as Elena interfaced her data chip. Layers of encryption fell away, not because of her skills, but because someone wanted her to see something. The first file was a shock. Planetary Conflict Report. Zortak Extinction Protocol. Classification: Omega Black. Date: 287 years ago. The document was a clinical account of what appeared to be a systematic elimination of the Zortak species, but something was off. Between the clinical language and redacted sections, Alina detected inconsistencies: survival rates, unaccounted population centers, deliberate obfuscation. A shadow moved behind her. "I was wondering when you'd find your way here," a voice said. Alina spun, her hand instinctively reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. An older man stood in the archival corridor, Dr. Viktor Kaminsky, a name she recognized from classified military research files. He looked like he'd been waiting a long time to have this conversation. "You're not supposed to be here," Alina said, more as a reflex than a genuine warning. Kaminsky chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. "Neither are you, but necessity creates strange paths." He approached the terminal, his movements slow but deliberate. Years of research had etched themselves into his posture, a man who had carried uncomfortable truths for far too long. "The Zortak were never fully eliminated," Kaminsky stated. "It wasn't a question. What humanity did, what I was part of, it was more than a war. It was a calculated attempt to suppress a civilization that threatened our expansion." The revelations came like a cascade. The Zortak weren't just another alien species. They possessed technological capabilities that made human advancements look primitive. Quantum communication, genetic adaptation, energy manipulation that bordered on the miraculous. "Why show me this?" Alina asked. Kaminsky's cybernetic eye, more advanced than Administrator Rice, flickered with complex data streams. "Because the survivor you helped in the diner isn't just another refugee. He's a key to a much larger puzzle." Outside the archival vault, alarms began to sound, soft at first, then growing in intensity. Something was moving through the station's systems, something that didn't conform to any known technological signature. "They're coming," Kaminsky whispered, a mix of terror and anticipation in his voice. Alina felt the station shift around her. The very metal seemed to breathe, to respond to an intelligence far beyond human comprehension. The Zortak weren't just survivors. They were waiting, preparing, and her simple act of kindness had just triggered something no one could have predicted. The archival vault's lights began to fluctuate. Data streams erupted across holographic displays, fragments of histories, of conflicts, of truths long buried. Alina realized she was standing at the precipice of a revelation that would rewrite everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe. Kaminsky looked at her, a lifetime of secrets reflected in his eyes. "Welcome to the real story," he said. "The one they never wanted you to know." The station's emergency protocols were a symphony of controlled chaos. Red warning lights pulsed through corridors, automated systems initiated lockdown sequences, and the low hum of defensive shields began to build. But Alina Rodriguez knew this was no ordinary security breach. Dr. Kaminsky had disappeared moments after his cryptic revelation, leaving behind a data crystal that now pulsed with an otherworldly light in her hand. The archival vault seemed to breathe around her. Technology and something else, something more fundamental, converging in ways she couldn't yet understand. Her communication implant crackled to life, but not with any standard station frequency. The signal was different, quantum entangled, breaking every known communication protocol. "Alina Rodriguez," a voice spoke. The same Zortak she'd helped in the diner. But now the voice carried a different resonance. No longer weak, no longer hiding. "Who are you?" she demanded. A moment of silence. Then, "I am Krelvex, last archival keeper of the quantum resonance. The one you showed mercy to when others would have turned away." The station around her began to shift. Walls seemed to become translucent, revealing layers of technology far beyond human understanding. Kaminsky's earlier words echoed. The Zortak were more than just another alien species. Emergency protocols continued their dance, but something was different. The defensive systems weren't responding to an external threat. They were responding to an internal transformation. Kralvex continued. Humanity believes it eliminated our civilization. The truth is far more complex. We chose withdrawal, observation, waiting. A holographic projection materialized, a history that had never been told. The Zortak weren't just technologically advanced. They were quantum adaptive beings. Each conflict, each near-extinction event, had been a calculated step in a plan spanning centuries. Alina realized the medical kit she'd given Kralvex was more than a simple act of kindness. It was a quantum entanglement trigger, a mechanism the Zortak had engineered generations ago, waiting for the right moment, the right individual. You were chosen, Kralvex explained. Not by us, by something larger. The station's core began to pulse, not with mechanical rhythms, but with a living, breathing energy that defied conventional physics. Layers of reality peeled back, revealing networks of communication that span not just star systems, but potentially entire dimensional planes. Administrator Reyes burst into the archival vault, a weapon charged and ready. But he stopped, frozen. The quantum field surrounding Elena had transformed the very nature of physical interaction. This ends now, Reyes shouted, but his words seemed to dissolve before reaching her. Kralvex's final transmission was both a warning and an invitation. Humanity stands at a crossroads. The path you choose will determine not just your future, but the future of quantum existence itself. Elena understood then that her simple act of compassion in a dingy space station diner was never just an act of kindness. It was the first domino in a cosmic realignment that would challenge everything humanity thought it knew about existence, civilization, and the very nature of consciousness. The quantum convergence had begun. The quantum field surrounding Epsilon 9 station transformed the very fabric of reality. What had begun as a simple act of kindness in a dingy space diner had evolved into a cosmic revelation that would reshape human understanding forever. Elena Rodriguez stood at the epicenter, her body now a living conduit between human perception and Zortak quantum consciousness. Around her, the station's systems pulsed with an energy that defied conventional physics, walls becoming translucent, time itself seeming to fold and unfold like liquid memory. Dr. Viktor Kaminsky emerged from the shadows, no longer just a researcher, but a key architect of a plan generations in the making. You don't fully understand what you've initiated, he said, his voice a mixture of excitement and profound concern. The quantum network that the Zortak had cultivated over centuries was now revealing itself. It was more than a technological marvel. It was a living network of consciousness, of potential, of survival strategies that spanned dimensional boundaries. The conflict between humans and Zortak was never about territory. Kralvex's voice resonated through the quantum field. It was a test, a preparation. Memories flooded Elena's consciousness, not just her own, but collective memories of both human and Zortak civilizations. She saw the wars, the near extinctions, the calculated withdrawals. What appeared to be defeat was actually a complex strategy of survival and adaptation. Administrator Reyes, still frozen in the quantum field, represented the old guard, those who believed in control through suppression and fear. But Elena was becoming something else entirely, a bridge between species, between understanding. The station around them began to transform. Technological systems merged with biological networks. Quantum entanglement created pathways of communication that transcended language, transcended species, transcended the very concept of individual consciousness. Humanity's greatest strength and greatest weakness has always been its ability to adapt, Kaminsky explained. The Zortak recognized this. Every conflict, every near-extinction event was a method of genetic and cognitive evolution. Suddenly, the quantum field revealed a staggering truth. The Zortak weren't just another alien species. They were architects of evolutionary potential, a civilization that had learned to navigate the very fabric of reality as easily as humans navigated ocean currents. Alina felt her consciousness expanding. She was simultaneously herself and something more, a convergence point of multiple evolutionary trajectories. Outside the station, space itself seemed to ripple. Quantum communication networks that had been hidden for centuries began to activate, not as weapons, but as bridges of understanding. Entire civilizations that had been waiting, watching, preparing now stirred. "The next phase begins," Kralvex announced. Rice finally understood the magnitude of what was happening. This was no invasion. This was a transformation, a cosmic recalibration of potential that would redefine the very nature of civilization itself. Alina Rodriguez, once a simple diner waitress, was now the key to this unprecedented convergence. Her single act of kindness had triggered a sequence of events that would challenge everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe. The quantum field pulsed, reality trembled, and the first true communication between species began. The quantum convergence had transformed everything. Epsilon 9 Station was no longer just a remote outpost in human-controlled space. It had become a nexus, a point of fundamental transformation that would reshape civilization's understanding of existence itself. Alina Rodriguez stood at the center of this cosmic recalibration, her consciousness now a bridge between multiple species, multiple realities. The simple act of kindness that had started in a dingy diner had unfolded into something far beyond any single moment of compassion. Humanity was never meant to be alone, Dr. Viktor Kaminsky said, his voice a mixture of wonder and vindication. The quantum network surrounding them pulsed with potential. Generations of hidden knowledge, suppressed technologies, and evolutionary pathways now converging. Kralvex, the Zortak who had first entered the diner seeking nothing more than water and momentary refuge, now revealed the true nature of their centuries-long plan. Survival is more than preservation, the alien consciousness explained. It is about transformation. The station's systems had become something entirely new, a living network that blended technological infrastructure with quantum consciousness. Administrator Reyes, once a symbol of bureaucratic control, now stood transformed. The rigid boundaries of human governance dissolved, replaced by a more fluid, interconnected understanding of existence. Memories flooded through the quantum field, not just of conflict, but of potential. The wars between humans and Zortak had been a crucible, a testing ground for a far more profound evolution. Each conflict, each near-extinction event, had been a carefully orchestrated step towards this moment of convergence. "We are not conquerors," Kralvex communicated. "We are architects of possibility." Around Epsilon 9, space itself seemed to breathe. Quantum communication networks that had been hidden for centuries activated, not as weapons, but as bridges of understanding. Entire civilizations that had been waiting, watching, preparing now stirred with a collective awakening. Alina understood now that her life, her entire existence, had been leading to this moment. The waitress who had shown compassion to a stranger was now the key to a transformative moment in galactic history. The quantum field revealed multiple potential futures, paths of conflict, paths of understanding, paths of collective evolution that transcended the very concept of individual species. "Choose," the collective consciousness communicated. And in that moment, Alina Rodriguez made a choice that would define the next stage of cosmic development. Not through grand gestures or military might, not through technological superiority or calculated aggression, but through the same simple act that had started everything: compassion. The quantum network pulsed, reality trembled, and a new chapter of existence began. Outside the station, stars continued their ancient dance, witnesses to a transformation that would echo through generations, through civilizations, through the very fabric of reality itself. Humanity was no longer alone, and the journey was just beginning.